The particle we will be learning in lesson 2 is the particle to. The to particle can be a little bit difficult because it does have 3 meanings. The good news is 2 of those meanings are very similar to each other. Jumping right into it, the first meaning of to is using to as a connector. When I say that, I mean that we're going to be connecting subjects. It can be 2 or 3 or more using this particle to. It's almost always going to be translated as and when used in this way. In our example, we have John to Mei wa gakusei da. That's going to be John and Mei are students. So John and Mei, just names in this case. So we have John, and to is going to be connecting John to the word Mei. Both of these subjects connected using to, and that's the same thing that we're doing in English, John and Mei. You might also notice here that both of these are being marked as our subject using the particle wa. The to particle kind of bundles them together, and then we can mark them both as the subject with just one wa here. And that's what's happening in this sentence. This is usually the easier meaning as far as the particle to goes. This is the first one that people think of when they think of to, and usually this is the one that is the easiest for people. The hardest of the 3 is using to as a thought marker. It's a bit of a weird use for the particle to be honest. And when I say a thought marker, I mean that to can be used to show the end of a thought or a quote. Because of this, it's most often going to be used with the verbs omo and iu. Omo means to think, and iu means to say. Both of these verbs are very, very useful and important, especially the verb omo. It's very common for people to be talking about their thoughts and the way that they feel about things, and so omo is super useful for that purpose. Because of to being used as this thought marker, it ends up being the case that almost always when we're using the verb omo, there's going to be a to right before it. Maybe not always, but 95% of the time, almost always, you'll see omo with a to right before it. And so if we look at an example sentence, we've got oishii to omo, which translates to I think it's delicious. Oishii in this case is the thing that's being thought, and the to particle marks the end of this thought. And then we can put on the verb omo to say I think. Works the exact same way with iu. Here we have a past tense conjugation, oishii to itta, which means I said it was good, he said it was good. Of course, as usual, our subject is left out, and we can just guess who it is. Doesn't really matter too much. But they said it was delicious. Now, the part that does get difficult is once again, when we have the last word in this thought or idea as a noun or a non-adjective, we do technically need a da before we can put on the to. So an example of that would be kare wa gakusei da to omou. Kare wa gakusei means he is a student, and if we want to say I think he's a student, we would have to put on the to omou, but before we can do that, we have to have this dot here because gakusei is a noun. Very difficult to remember. This is the exact same da that we saw with sentence enders in lesson 1. So you can kind of bundle those together in your head because it is the same da. And if you were to forget this da, it's not the end of the world. It's actually somewhat commonly left out, but it is supposed to be there for grammatical functions. So do try and remember it. But if you were to forget it and say kare wa gakusei to omou, it's still fine. It just should be kare wa gakusei da to omou. And looking at the last meaning of to can also be used to mean with. That's very similar to and we'll look at those similarities in just a bit here. But first, if we have a sentence like Takeshi to umi ni iku, that can translate to I'm going to the ocean with Takeshi. So here we have Takeshi to, and then this umi here is not another subject, so it's kind of a separate part of the sentence. And so we just have Takeshi to, and there's not really anything that the to is connecting to. Because of that, we know that it means with. If there was something that it's clearly connected to, then it means and, but if it's just kind of on the end like this, then it will be translated to with instead. If we compare that with the meaning of and, we could have a very similar sentence that is Watashi to Takeshi wa umi ni iku, and that would translate then to Takeshi and I will go to the ocean. As far as the meaning of these two sentences go, it's almost exactly the same. The only real difference is in this sentence, because we have Takeshi to, this would be written, you could have a watashi wa at the beginning of the sentence, and now our subject is very clearly watashi, and Takeshi is not a subject. He's just kind of extra information at this point. Whereas if we say it this way, watashi to Takeshi wa, now these are again being bundled together and both marked as the subject with wa. So in this example, using and, both of the subjects are equal in importance, whereas in this version, meaning with, then we have a little bit of extra importance to watashi, and Takeshi is just kind of on the side in this case. There are some very good practice cards for these, so definitely try those out and get a nice good visualization of how the to particle works.